I am Vinnie Tollerton, folks. Here we are again on the Friday show. Your good intentions have been stolen, but don't worry, I'm here to help you get them back. You may be soft and succulent when we start this process, but hang in there. Before long, you will be lean and mean, and that's a money-back guarantee. And since you paid absolutely nothing for this podcast, I can make that guarantee over and over again. It's the Friday show, so you know what that means. We bring someone in who has way more knowledge than I will ever have. And this guy has been around for a while. I see him everywhere. You want to go watch him on YouTube. He's going to drop a lot of crazy knowledge on you. I do this from memory, but I'm just going to say that Dr. Robert Cywes, or Cywes, we're going to have to ask him how he pronounces that. He's a dual certified doctor. Dual certified. That's like having dual exhaust in your car. When you see that, you know automatically it's got to be a faster car. So he's got to be a faster doctor. I don't care how you look at it. The one thing, and it's going to be the first question I'm going to ask this guy, is he is both an adult general surgeon and a pediatric surgeon. That's not what scares me. One of the things he does is gastric surgery. And God, I hope he's not going to tell me he does this to kids, because I don't want to know that we've actually ended up there in life. Folks, Dr. Robert Cywes, or Cywes, tell me how you pronounce it.
It's Rob is fine. My dad is Dr. Cywes, but it's Cywes. Hey, Vinnie, it's good to be with you, man. It's great to see you.
Was that accurate? I mean, please don't tell me we're giving kids bariatric surgeries at this point.
Well, I think it's a rapidly rising trend, and it is something that I do absolutely, but it's a life-saving thing. Wow. You know, kids shouldn't die, and if they are leading to that, it's horrible. But there are kids out there that are busy killing themselves, and I'm not in favor of this as a frontline thing. It really is a rescue surgery that we do. For example, if they have cancer, you're not going to remove organs and do things, but if they're cancerous and it's going to save the kid's life, we do. But my objective is to prevent anybody, kids, adults, from having surgery by helping them to help themselves. So that's the primary aspect. If we have to add surgery in as a tool to help them on that journey, we'll do it, but not as an alternative to the effort and the change in their lifestyle that they have to make. And I think it's a controversial thing. I'm happy to take a lot of flack and questions for it.
I'm just, look, I grew up in the 1970s. I was a kid of the 70s. And, you know, the fat kid was 20 pounds overweight. I remember when we first started noticing girls, if the girl had an extra 5 pounds, she was the chunky chick. And by the way, I'm not being a misogynist here. I'm not being an asshole. I'm talking in the 1970s. As I tell everyone, go back to 1969 and look at pictures from Woodstock. These people were not triathletes, and they look better than people who went triathlons today. I'm sorry, they did. And these people never did any exercise. So to hear that in 2021, you know, that we're doing gastric bypass, give me an example of, you know, the age, the height, the weight. Let's take a boy.
Absolutely. How much do you weigh, Vinnie?
Soaking wet, geez, I'll probably go 173.
So I saw a kid this morning, okay, 17-year-old kid, who's just lost 250 pounds. He just broke the 250-pound mark. He's 17 years old. That's what he's lost. And he's probably still got another 50, 60 pounds to go. Wow. That kid was not going to do that by himself. He's been fat since before he was born. He was born to a diabetic mother. He was carb addicted in the womb. And that kid has done amazingly well. His psyche, he's now able to walk. He couldn't walk before. He's actually looking at running his first 5K. So I've given him his life back. Was it a radical step to do? Absolutely. But I want to correct something. I don't do gastric bypass surgery. I'll do a sleeve, I'll put a band on these kids, but I don't do metabolic surgery because they're still growing. But this kid has lost you and then some. And if you put that into perspective, that's the challenge. So giving a kid his life back at that age is important. I'm not going to do some fluffy 20-year-old kid, a 20-pound overweight kid. It's not for those kids. These are the worst of the worst. But on the flip side, Vinnie, you know that most 5-year-olds are beginning to have insulin resistance.
Yeah, I'm trying to think the other Robert, Dr. Robert, he's a child.
Lustig. Lustig.
Lustig.
Yeah.
He's been on this show. He's written incredible books. He did Sugar, the Bitter Truth, folks. If you ever want to go watch a great video online, it's free. You can go watch it. Robert said right here in this podcast exactly the same thing you're saying. These kids are carb addicted in the womb. They're seeing young girls developing breast at 7 and 8 years old because of all of this crappy estrogen and everything. It's scary what's going on with kids. To put a button in there somewhere, and I was working in school. I was the health and fitness coordinator at a really rich school, a very wealthy school in New Orleans, Louisiana. And I started noticing, I was right out of college in 1987, 88. I was working there, and I noticed the athletes. Now, two of the best quarterbacks in the NFL came out of that school, the Manning brothers. I coached two of the Mannings, Cooper and Peyton. And the bottom line is that I started noticing kids gaining weight back then. And I started noticing that before they came to work out with me in the gym, they had to have a snack. They could not have a snack. And I thought that was odd. It was odd because I played football, and the last thing I had to eat was at noontime when we had lunch, and we would hit the football field at 3:30 and practice until 6 o'clock. There was no eating between that 12:30 meal and 6 o'clock. And we did one of the most strenuous sports on the planet for several hours in there, and everyone had energy. Yet I couldn't get the girls' volleyball team or the swim team or anyone to come into that gym. They had to hit snacks on the way in.
And they weren't sucking back Gatorade while they were playing.
Meaning us or
no?
them?
Yeah, I mean, you guys weren't. And when I played, we drank water. And but now they're sucking back Gatorade, and they can't survive without a Gatorade every 5 minutes.
They need a hit of sugar. Just pure sugar constantly. And I looked at that and I started noticing these kids can't do without this, and they need it all the time, and they were getting fatter and fatter. So when I moved out to Hollywood in 1991, just a few years later, I went there with a mission. I wanted to get into child fitness on television. I went to Nickelodeon, which was brand new back then. I went to Disney. I went to all these places, and I said, guys, I have these ideas. I want to produce these TV shows, children's fitness. This is what I'm going to do. And they were like, yeah, we're all in. We're going to do this. Yeah, let's do it. What do you propose? And I would say, okay, we got to get them off of all this sugary stuff. And it was basically, one of these, they would just kick me right out of, just go, get out. We can't have this, right? You got to go. And it's like, well, what's wrong? It's like, all of our sponsors, Coca-Cola, Gatorade, Fruit Roll-Ups, cereal, General Mills, we can't tell people not to eat what our sponsors are pushing. So we can't do it. I was fighting a losing battle, but I knew we had a problem, and I knew that there was not a damn thing I can do about it. What say you, Doc?
You're 100% right, but I want to flip this conversation. First of all, let me just tell you that the woman that was the CEO, first African-American woman to be the CEO of the American Diabetes Association, I believe she was at one stage insulin dependent as a type 2. And she just resigned a little bit ago. And the reason she resigned is one of the reasons is because she couldn't talk about the fact that she was on a ketogenic or a low-carb diet. And that's how she put her diabetes into remission. Because the American Diabetes Association doesn't care about patients at all. It is a front for the sponsors, for the drug makers of the 99 drugs on the ADA that are ridiculously expensive that you see on TV that don't fix diabetes at all. And when you ask them about carbohydrate reduction to cure diabetes or to put it in remission, they tell you, no, it's associated with a global healthy lifestyle, but you can't reverse it. And we know categorically 60% of my patients are diabetic. So what you said about the sponsors and about how industry is persevering this is huge. The other comment I want to make to you, Vinnie, is this, and this is so important for me as the carb addiction doc. A statistic for you, nothing to do with food, sugar, anything else.
Right.
I treat a lot of educators here in Palm Beach County, And I can tell you in the state of Florida, and I don't think the rest of America is different, more than 50% of our high school kids vape on a regular basis. And vape is nicotine. Vape, nicotine, okay? More than 50%. Almost every day, there's some kid at high school being carried out in an ambulance because they became so anxiety ridden because they were overdoing the nicotine. And Juul, for example, which is the thing that gives you the vape with the kids, it's massive in the high schools, and it gives them a huge dose of nicotine. So why am I talking about that on a show where we should be talking about carbohydrates and things?
Right.
It's because what really is happening, whether it's carbohydrates or vaping, those are drugs that the children are using for dysfunctional emotional management. Obesity is not about what you eat. Obesity is not about what you eat. It's about why you eat. And these kids have shifted from a very early age, possibly even a fetal age, away from eating primarily for the nutritional value of food to eating and drinking primarily for the endorphin high that you get from sugar and starch, particularly the sugar and starch products that the manufacturers know in the right combination of fat and sugar gives those kids the maximum high. Just like the tobacco industry knows that if they fill Juul with a massive hit of nicotine, those kids are hooked like this, especially if they come from a parenting situation where they're not taught adequate effort-based emotion management skills. Physical activity is really not there about burning off calories. Physical activity gives you an unconditional high. There's no remorse or regret on the back end of going for a run. Even if I go for a walk or a run and I stub my toe, I'm not ashamed or upset that I had that run. I eat a tub of ice cream, I'm ashamed of that on the back end. Going for a walk or a run in tiny increments builds up my self-esteem, my self-confidence, and my self-respect. Eating a tub of ice cream, subconsciously or consciously vaping, destroys my self-esteem, my self-confidence, and my self-respect. And if your self-esteem is in the toilet, you seek refuge, you seek a safe haven in external substances that give you instant gratification. Obesity has nothing to do with food. Obesity has nothing to do with food. It's a substance abuse problem. And until we use substance abuse methodology rather than calorie restriction, we're never, ever going to solve this problem. And it's a parenting problem for these kids. Well, and I'm very expressive about that.
No, you and I are on the same page because, look, I've been yelling for years that everything with these kids are instant. I talk about it all the time. When you watch a movie nowadays, the movie has to take off like that. Back when I was a kid, if you were watching an action adventure movie, it would just meander. And there was a big car chase at the end. Right. Movies today, you have to start with the biggest car chase and then somehow make it bigger and bigger because these kids are used to endorphin rushes all day long. Look, online, they call me Gran Torino and because it's funny and it's kind of true. I'm yelling about people having a phone in their hand at all times. And I watch mommies and kids walk behind them like ducklings and everyone is looking at a phone. I had a group, a mom and two kids walk in front of me at the supermarket there that I was going to get something, buy lunch. And I stopped and the mom is looking at the phone and the two daughters are walking behind the mom, looking at the phone, never looked up to see if there was a 6,000-pound vehicle with a lot of horsepower that could have mowed them over. Luckily, my vehicle have brakes or they would have been dead, right? Just like ducks, walking and looking at the phone. They can't put it down for 1 second. That's a problem. That's an instant. They talk about that now. I've been yelling about that for years, but we talk about these endorphin rushes. You get this rush. They talk about all these chicks, and I say chicks more than guys, but it is. On Instagram, they get this rush every time they put a thing up and they get more and more followers. It's all this instant rush. And when you think about it, if you eat a steak or if you eat fish or if you eat anything that's just fat laden, there's no instant rush. It's just, it will sate you and you will feel better. It won't do anything special. Protein won't do anything special. But put sugar or carbohydrates in your body and your brain lights up. It's a continuation. It's like the movie with the car crash at the beginning. It's like putting something or seeing something online where you have to buy it and have it and do everything right now. And sugar is the same way. You put it in your body. It's like a juice, like a cigarette. It's like anything else. It's right now. It's not 5 minutes from now. It's even Starbucks has figured this out. Starbucks does not really sell coffee anymore. It's the second biggest fast food operation in this nation and I think around the globe because they're not selling what's in this cup, which is coffee. They're selling sugar, and they're not just selling regular sugar. They're pumping corn syrup in there constantly, high fructose corn syrup, and people are just coming in, and you see the asses and the guts getting fatter and fatter. It's not going in the opposite direction, and sometimes I feel like I'm just pissing in a barrel trying to fill it up. And the barrel
Starbucks is the greatest crack house in America. On every street corner, you got this crack house, and people are lining up for their hit. So you're absolutely right. I mean, that's the tragedy. But let's walk this back for a second, because the drugs are there as a surrogate for time-based parenting. In other words, and you said that mom is on her phone and the kids are on their phone, but really what that mom is not doing and what the dads are not doing, they're not spending time with their kids. You see, to build a healthy, effective emotion management system, you've got two emotion management systems. You've got instant gratification, which is drugs and behavior. I can talk about that in a second, where you get the upfront reward and there's negativity, guilt, harm, remorse on the back end. But an effort-based system, which is what our kids should be learning, is where you put effort in up front. There's a time component, and then the reward is the pride and the pleasure that you receive from the effort. So if I'm going to go for a walk or a run, I've got to put the effort in to go for the run. The high doesn't happen like this, like it does with nicotine or sugar. The high is slow. As I'm on that walk or that run, the world dissolves around me. And as I'm relaxing and chilling out and dealing with my emotional tension, as that goes away, I now have a time component in kind of almost that meditative pattern that happens while you're running, where my subconscious is going to show me I'm going to use a medical word here if you're okay with it, some
Absolutely.
of the shit that we haven't dealt with through the day. And when we can connect with our own shit and process it and deal with it and come to terms with it, by the time I come back from that run, I'm emotionally relaxed. I've got a game plan for dealing with some of the issues that caused my emotional tension. And I'm pretty proud of the fact I went for a run. Doesn't matter how long or how far. That pride builds up my self-esteem, and I'm going to reinvest. But if I don't put the effort in, if I don't make the time to put the effort into physical activity, to creative arts, to spirituality or meditation, or to empathetic human connection, where we look each other in the eyeball, virtually or really, and have a conversation rather than a soundbite, as you said on Instagram, we're not building up an effort-based emotion management system. And if I open most kids' emotion management toolkits, is basically carbohydrates, Instagram, or whatever, Facebook or whatever it is, and maybe some Juul. And their anxiety levels, their depression levels, their suicide levels, nobody's talking about that. Nobody's talking about, my son is at Georgetown University. Last year, he lost 4 friends, 4 of his age-related friends, he's 21, who committed suicide. And nobody's talking about that. And that is such an incredible tragedy, because the problem is here, we're faced with extraordinary emotional tsunamis, and these kids do not have the capacity to deal with it. And a tub of ice cream ain't going to satisfy you.
No,
So
it's not.
I'm in. That's the work I do.
Yeah. No, a tub of ice cream is a Band-Aid on a broken leg. It just doesn't fix the problem. You know, I was watching Real Sports, the Brian Gumbel show, which is done out of Florida, I think. And they were doing a thing on what happened to athletes during the pandemic, meaning high school athletes, the same kids you're talking about here, Robert. And what they were saying is these kids, when they found out their season was ending and there was no more season, the depression that came over these kids, it was just humongous. And a couple of them, the moms are crying, going, my kid tried to end his life or her life. And you'll go, oh, well, come on, these are special cases. I've been hearing about this, and, you know, I take phone calls. You know, anyone can call me. You go to VinnieTotters.com, set up a phone call. It's little or nothing. You can talk to me. Through the pandemic, I spoke to more parents saying, I don't know what to do with my kid. And I would say to them, can you go outside and just shoot some basketball? Well, it's freezing up here, and well, it's freezing. Do you have ice skates? Or can you go skiing? Can you cross-country ski? Can you do anything? You're telling me your kid is contemplating suicide. Go outside. Get out of the house right now. Just go. As a matter of fact, we can start this phone call again later. I won't charge you for it. We could do it again. Go do something now. Go right now. And they don't think it's that urgent. It's like, well, he's not going to kill himself today. You don't know that. You don't know that. They might. And there was a lot of those phone calls to me because these parents were at wit's end. Vinnie, what are you doing during the pandemic? Hell, I went out and bought a rowing machine. I pulled my spinner out of the closet and just started, like a rat on a treadmill. I had this guy on years ago. God, I can't think of his name now. He's a doctor up in New York. And we were talking about exercise in the brain. And I had another doctor on the week before, and we were talking about sugar in the brain. Now, here's the interesting thing. All of these parents I talk to, and I want you to speak to this, Robert, all of these parents I talk to, they go, I want my kid to end up at Duke or, Harvard or this school or that school, UVA. I want my kid to go to, this school out in LA and whatever. I want my kid to be in a top school. So everything is about education. Everything. Okay, great. What are you feeding them for breakfast? Cereal. Well, number one, you're starting your kid off with a fucked up brain. Sorry.
Just cheese. Yeah.
Get some fat and protein in that kid in the morning. Number one. And then you start talking, it's like, oh, they don't even do morning recess anymore. Really? Because I have doctors telling me that exercise is the most important thing to keep the brain nimble. And these schools are not only cutting out morning recess, in most cases, they're proudly cutting out physical education. Right?
But they brought in the Coke vending machine.
Robert, I'm glad you brought that up because back during let me see if I can remember, Clinton administration, Clinton did a whole thing. Clinton had heart trouble and he did two things. Let me tell you guys how great the great President Clinton was. And by the way, I don't do politics on this podcast, but I'll talk about Clinton the same way I'll talk about whichever president fucked up. I will talk about it. Let me tell you what the great Clinton did. He came out and said, no more soft drinks in schools. Did you know about this?
Did not know about this.
You were probably still in South Africa.
No, I was here. I believe.
No more soft drinks in school. Done. They took all the soft drinks out. Clinton is high-fiving himself. Oh, yeah, look at me. I'm great. I'm high. Took the soft drinks out. Okay, great. Did you take the machines out? No, he didn't. They filled the machines with fruit juice, with high fructose corn syrup in a different way. So he did this big thing about taking sodas out of school, and he did worse. He put more high fructose corn syrup in because fruit juice has even less water and more sugar than a Coca-Cola. Sorry, that's a fact.
Right, that's the manipulation of the guys that own those vending machines. That's the challenge.
Yeah, but wait, Clinton went one step further, and I want you to speak to this. Clinton had heart trouble and still does, as you know.
Right.
He hooked up with Dean Ornish, and they came up with this whole vegan fakakta thing that's still going on now, which my next movie is all about. I talk about this in the movie. It's like, what did you do, Clinton? Well, number one, you made everyone fatter and you made everyone sicker. And by the way, putting all that sugar in kids in school, you made them dumber. Sorry, fact. What say you, Doc?
I think you're absolutely right. I think, Dean Ornish had a good idea, but we've already proven that that's not necessarily the right way to go. I'll tell you a little Bill Clinton story. I was working at a hospital here in Palm Beach County, and a friend of his got injured. It was a big trauma center. And I was walking down the corridor, and I bumped into this guy, and he looked old and skinny. He looked awful. And, I can't do his accent, but it was Bill Clinton. And we stopped and we chatted, and he asked what I did. And I said, look, I'm doing childhood obesity, adult obesity. And he said, well, I've just started this diet. And we talked about it, and I said, where are you getting your protein from? Where are you getting your brain food from, your 3 omegas from? And at the end of that conversation, I believe he started to do this. At least he started to eat some salmon and some fish again. But he looked awful. I mean, looked better than he did with a heart disease. But the problem is he's an attorney. He's not a physician. And he was convinced by these people with big names, big titles, name recognition, that the right thing to do was an early plant-based diet. And at least in the conversation I had with him, I was able to convince him at least get some fish in. And I believe when I spoke to him a little while, about a year later, he was eating some fish. But a good guy who was misled at first with a standard American diet, and secondly with a plant-based treatment for it. And it's sad because he is a good guy. He's a good citizen.
Yeah, I have no problem with Bill Clinton, but you know what? These guys listen to these idiots. I always tell people, look at Dean Ornish. Does he look healthy? Is that a yes or a no? Does he look healthy?
Yeah.
Look at Michael Greger, who calls himself Dr. Michael Greger, but he never did his internship. So at best, he's a PhD. But he wears a lab coat with a stethoscope. So I guess that, the connotation is that he's playing a doctor on the
There's
internet.
a lot of Hollywood actors that do the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. My buddy Howie Mandel was on a show back in the 70s called Saint Elsewhere. He was a doctor who graduated from Tulane. Howie Mandel is a comedian. In my opinion, Howie Mandel knows more about diets than Michael Greger. Bottom line, does Michael Greger look good to you? The guy's not even 50 yet. He's 47.
Right,
does he look like a 47-year-old man, or does he look like an 85-year-old woman who smokes? Just look at him. Okay. Look at Dr. McDougall. Look at Walter Willett. His mustache looks healthier than him.
The Chan School of Health at Harvard. That is a hole in the wall for the perseveration of industry-sponsored poor health.
Robert, young Robert. Wait until you see my new movie. I'm mentioning the name of it right here. It's the second time I'm mentioning it because the movie's coming out in January. It's going to be up for pre-sale in about 3 weeks. The movie's called Beyond Impossible. I'm going after Beyond Burger and Impossible Burger and Beyond Meat and the whole thing.
Fantastic.
It's Beyond Impossible. It's going to be gravitas again. It's getting massive release, just like my other two movies.
Excellent.
I'm going head on at Walter Willett, who I asked to be in the movie. He declined. I show the letter on screen. I show his decline letter. Michael Greger declined, saying he was busy that day, except I didn't give him a date to record. And here's the other problem. Greger wrote back and said, you have to have a certain size audience for me to even consider you to be in your movie.
Nice.
I met all the criteria plus. But he said, nah, I'm good. McDougall didn't just decline, but he berated my, can I call a secretary, my assistant? What do you call these people nowadays? He kept berating my assistant. He kept writing back to my assistant saying, how can you even work for such a man? Meaning me.
Yeah.
I don't know. She wants to pay for shit, I guess.
I can't wait to see that movie because that's going to be really, really good.
Oh, listen. Usually whenever, I don't know if you've ever been around documentaries, but you have to go through a clearing process. Mm-hmm. And, the attorney that's on your side, the one that would have to go and defend you, they watch every frame of the movie. And then to give you an example, for my first two movies, we have a couple of phone conversations. The first one is the longest one. I remember for Fat 1, it lasted about an hour. For Fat 2, because they ask you every question about everything, every frame in that movie, because if you get sued, they're the ones that have to go to bat, right? Because you have all this insurance and everything you have to buy. The second movie, about 45 minutes on the phone with the attorney. This movie, 2.5 hours, maybe 3 hours.
Wow.
One of the questions, and I'm not making this up because the attorneys don't know these doctors. He said, you were showing, they were worried about the fact that I was making Michael Greger look bad on purpose. They said, well, he's doing this interview and you make him look like he's insane. So did you pull that out of context? And I said, I'll tell you guys what you need to do. Go watch the entire video, the entire interview. He's like that the entire time. And I said, go watch interviews he does with his friend McDougal. They're on the same side. Watch 2 or 3 videos and then come back to me and tell me whether I'm making this guy look bad on purpose. My attorney called me the next day and he was like, wow, I thought you were exaggerating a little bit, but I've never seen anything like this. And this is what these guys do for a living. These are special attorneys that go in and they, because they're working for you and the guy that's insuring you. They want to make sure you're not going to get sued by anyone saying, oh, you took me out of context. He couldn't believe what he was watching. It was like he was blown away, right? Folks, once you can pre-order Beyond Impossible, get it right away. You want to see this first. You're not going to believe what we do in this movie. I go head on into, I talk about the movie, What the Health? Not What the Health. What's the one they did after that? Game Changers.
Game Changers, right? Yeah, yeah.
I go after Game Changers because I started looking into the athletes because they were saying, look, these athletes, like, I'll give you an example. The guy that's supposed to be the strongest man in the world, right? They go, hey, this is vegan. This is the strongest man in the world. He's a vegan. Well, the thing you don't know about me, Robert, is I'm a nerd. And what nerds do is they watch things like the strongest man in the world competition.
Right.
And this dude has never shown up. Like, he's not even in a preliminary rounds. He doesn't get invited to the show. Right.
Yeah.
So that's where we are with him. So I was like, well, how can they call him one of the strongest men in the world? Right. So I started looking into it. And I started looking at some of his records. I said, well, they're saying it's a record. It's a world record at a vegan convention in a town of 300 people in South Texas somewhere. He won the competition that day. He's the strongest vegan. You see, they don't tell you that part.
Right.
They leave that out conveniently. He's like, oh, he's the strongest man in the world. This guy just eats plants. Right. Have you ever seen the guy? Do you know who I'm talking about?
I'm not sure exactly who that athlete is, but I certainly, Game Changers was a game changer for them in a negative way, I believe. Created a lot of hype, but there's no way that Schwarzenegger could have been Mr. Universe with or without steroids on lettuce leaves. Just wasn't going to happen.
Well, let me tell you what I did with him in the movie. And I'm a Schwarzenegger fan. We all grew up with him, right?
I do. That broke my heart when I heard about what he did.
Well, you see, he did his friend James Cameron, who produced the movie, a favor because James Cameron had like a $30 million. We show all this in a movie. James Cameron had a $30 million stake in a pea protein company. Right. So he did this movie to kick off the company. And then, for when I could tell, sold most of his stock.
Yeah, of course. You ramp the stock up and then
ramp it up and then sell it. So it's basically illegal what James Cameron did. But hey, more power to him. Rich people get richer. That's fine. But Schwarzenegger admitted to doing drugs throughout his whole career as an athlete, as a bodybuilder. If you watch Pumping Iron, they're sitting there smoking marijuana just to come down from all the other drugs they're taking. He's talked about using steroids and everything else. He was a vegan the day before he recorded for that movie. And then I show a video of Schwarzenegger, like 2 weeks after the movie came out. He opens his fridge to show everyone what he's eating. Right there in the fridge, you got dairy, you got eggs, and you have meat in his fridge. So I show before, during, and after to show that Schwarzenegger just went in to help out his buddy and say, hey, here we are. Yeah, this is, I'm vegan. I'm vegan. Blah, blah, blah. He was never vegan. He's never been vegan for a day of his life. He just lied. He's a politician. They lie, folks.
So Vinnie, I'm not sure. Listen, I'm going to call him out on that. But also remember, he nearly died when he had his heart valve replaced. And they had to rush him back through the bottom of the hospital and redo his heart. And when those cardiologists get hold of you and they pound into you that one of the reasons, now he didn't have atherosclerosis, he had a bad valve. One of the reasons you nearly died was because you didn't socially distance from a cow or a steak.
Right.
They are so influential at a person's most vulnerable time. When you've nearly died from a heart attack, and that cardiologist is telling you you need to be plant-based, don't eat fat, don't eat salt. That is at a person's, when their life is spinning around in front of them.
Right.
And it's the most influential time. Nobody gets fat from eating fat. You and I know that. Yeah. And when you look at those cardiologists, not a lot of Americans are eating a ton of fat. So how can something that we're not eating be causing you that kind of heart disease? So, Arnold had the influence from his cardiologists and then from his best buddy. And let's face it, he is the politician. So the people behind that, the guys that are pulling the strings on that, they are the guys. Arnold was the face of it. And he disappointed me tremendously because he was a hero for me growing up.
Yeah.
I mean, he was an absolute hero for me growing up. And he really disappointed me when it came to the truth. But it's really the guys behind him that are the danger. And I'm so pleased you're exposing that in this movie.
I'm exposing anyone and everyone. I'm exposing Walter Willett. I'm exposing the whole world network that they're trying to, you know what I'm talking about. I don't want to talk too much about it here, but I'm exposing all of it. All of it. I'm tired of beating around the bush. I'm taking a bush and I'm chopping it off right at its roots, and I'm ripping the roots out and I'm chewing them myself like a vegan because I'm sick and tired of everyone lying about what's going on. And you know what? I want them to come after me on this film. That's why I spent 3 hours on the phone with my attorney, making sure everything is buttoned up. Because you want to come after me? Come after me, bro. Because let me tell you something. You ain't going to win. You're not going to win.
And that's what happened with Tim Noakes. I love Tim to bits, and most people know who he is, but Tim was prosecuted for making one statement about pregnant moms breastfeeding. But Tim basically said to the dietitians, and this is what I love about the same argument, he basically said, okay, you bring your facts, I'll bring mine. And let's go head to head, because either you're right or I'm right. One of us is wrong, one of us is right. You come with your facts, I come with mine. The problem with Willett, the problem with David Katz, the problem with those guys is they do personal assaults, and they look at their personality and their titles as a sense of entitlement because they cannot be supported by the facts of the human being health. And the challenge for those people is that they cannot go toe-to-toe with facts. So I would love for those guys to challenge you, but they won't. They won't.
No.
They'll get their lawyers to write letters. They'll make a lot of noise, and they have the media to make the noise, but they're never, ever going to go toe-to-toe with you because the facts are on your side.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I didn't tell one lie about one person in this movie. And as a matter of fact, to make sure on camera, I show the letters I sent out because I was dying to have vegans in my movie, not to berate them. I wanted to do a movie. I originally set out to show both sides. Here it is, folks. Here it is. Boom. Here's this side. Here's that side. Make a choice. That's the movie I wanted to make. I couldn't get any vegan to show up. Walter Willett would not show up. Too busy. Can't do it. Busy that day, they would tell me. Okay, you guys don't want to show up? Fine. I'm good with that because I'm going to show up anyway and show them what you care about. And you don't care about anyone. You care about your bottom line and all this bullshit and all these people, your ADA, who's got money coming in from every damn company around the world. The AHA's got money coming in from every company around the world. You got your Unilevers giving away bazillions of dollars. I'm going after Impossible Burgers and Impossible Meat. I'm going after all of them, right? And I'm showing where the money is coming from and what they're trying to do and their global view of what they want you to do. I know it makes me sound like a flat earther or some guy that believes in some kind of Illuminati, but I'm going to actually show you guys these people talking on camera. No one's ever done this before. This has never been done in a movie. Nothing like this has ever been done, period. This is going to be a first time.
No, I think it's excellent. I think, I'm going to throw something controversial at you because that's really what we're talking about is rough stuff. When I look at nutrition in this country, it's a bell curve. You've got your carnivores and your meat-based people on one side, you've got your vegans on the other side. And the reality is that Joe Blow carnivore, Joe Blow vegan, they really are, in a guided or a misguided way, trying to do the best for their health.
Right.
The problem is the folks in the middle that are eating this manufactured American shit, or the carbohydrate fat stuff, and the people behind that that are promoting that as a diet. And my concern is the puppeteers that are pulling the strings on those folks. Whether you are misguided as a vegan, you're trying to do something that's healthy for you as Joe Blow, that young kid trying to improve their health. I'll give that guy credit and try to guide them back. They're not the enemy. The enemy are the people behind that know the truth, the tobacco companies, not the smoker, the people that know the truth and are hiding it for profit. And I'm going to tell you something else that I've got a little crystal ball here right now, Vinnie.
Okay.
Our president, Joe Biden, is currently in Glasgow at the climate summit.
Right.
And this morning, I believe, or last night, he came out and said that this country is going to fiercely battle methane. And I'm very concerned about that. Now, methane leaking from natural gas, from the pipes, the old pipes in Boston, absolutely fix those pipes. But you know where people with agendas are going to really, really hammer us. And I'm very concerned about this because it's literally what we're talking about is bullshit, because they're going to come after the animal industry. They're going to come after cows and pigs and sheep. And because they say, oh, all these animals, these cows produce all this methane. Well, humans produce a hell of a lot more methane than any of the livestock. And we produce methane when we eat vegetables. Be that as it may, that I'm very, very afraid that this new agenda condemning methane as part of the climate change, the global warming, is going to hurt the animal industry. It's going to hurt the meat industry.
Well, they've been using, look, when they figured out that guys like you and me got on the internet and explained to people that if you eat meat, you get thin, they started losing that battle. So they started going after methane. And here's the problem with that. The methane that an animal puts out, including humans, is chewed up by the CO2 anyway, and it's regenerative, right? And that's shown in the movie. I have Dr. Mittlerner in the movie explaining how that works. I also have Frederic Lacroix in the movie showing how some of this stuff works, right? Telling the truth. Methane is not the problem, but let me ask you this question. Which animal do you think puts out probably the most methane on Earth? If not the most, one of the most. Go on.
I would say us.
No. Not even close. Termites.
Oh, of course. Yes.
Termites.
Yes.
They're more termites than any other animal. And all they do is chew up wood and spit out methane.
Right. Correct.
Right. So, okay, Joe Biden, come on home. Let's get rid of wood, I guess. What are we going to do? Kill off all
I think that it's a good idea to limit the methane gas that's escaping into the atmosphere. No question in my mind that that's the right thing to do.
Sure.
But the pivot, it's putting bullets in the guns of the anti-animal lobbies to say, okay, your cows. They already said that one of the largest contributors this morning on a radio show I was listening to talked about pig and cow manure as being a large contributor toward the methane global warming. And, that is literally what they're talking about is bullshit. And that's the problem for me, is that they are going to use that. They're going to arm the guns of the plant lobby with that. And I'm very afraid of that. Very, very afraid.
You know what? It's talking points that they're using to get rid of meat. Look, we've dropped, when you look at Western Europe, when you look at the United States, when you look at developed countries, not developing countries, because they don't give a fuck. Look at developed countries and the billions and billions we've dropped into CO2, trying to scrub any kind of CO2 over the past 10 years. You know how much we've scrubbed out of the atmosphere? You want to take a guess?
Probably very, very little.
Zero.
Yeah.
Zero. We're not even in the negatives. We've done nothing. And we've spent bazillions of dollars on it. And it's not coming from, it's not the methane. That's the problem. The CO2. Yeah. By the way, you guys, whatever Pedia calls me a cholesterol denier, I don't even know what that means, because I don't deny cholesterol. I tell everyone we need cholesterol to live. Your brain needs it to function. But you want to call me, now they're going to start calling me a climate denier. But what does that mean? Because I'm saying, yeah, we have a problem. Global warming is a problem. CO2 in the atmosphere is a problem. What you guys are saying is the problem is not the problem. You guys want to stop this? Quit flying around, get rid of your car, get rid of your cell phone, because every time you plug it in, guess what? Electricity ain't free. You know, there's something, you could go right back to friction and E equals MC squared, wherever you want to go and figure it out. Something needs to turn around and around to create energy, to get it into that phone. Electricity is not what you think it is. You could buy every Prius and every Tesla in the world. Guess what? Just because it's not spewing out of a tailpipe, it's spewing out of a factory that made it. Okay. So
you're exactly right.
You know,
the human footprint is bigger. The smallest human has a bigger footprint than the biggest dinosaur in terms of climate impact.
Absolutely. So you want to get rid of problems? Day one, get rid of your air conditioning. Cut it off, never use it again. Day two, get rid of your cell phone. Day three, get rid of your television. And please, whatever you do, the lighting and heating and cooling of your home gotta go, because that's where the problem is, folks. And all the windmills and all the solar panels in the world cannot harness that problem. Okay? It's not going to happen that way. The numbers, look, it doesn't take a genius. I figured it out. I'm an idiot. It doesn't take a genius to see that we can't do it that way. It's never going to work. So unless you want to live like the Amish, this problem ain't going away. Okay? Now, if you guys want to talk about nuclear energy or some other energy where we're not spewing off into the atmosphere and all this, you know, maybe that's the way to go. I don't know. I don't work in that field. But the bottom line is,
it's not energy manufacture, it's energy demand. And the average human's footprint is energy utilization footprint is enormous. And that's where the problem, you know, even just the food that we eat, you're eating, where it's some vegetables or some meat, it requires very, very little energy to heat up a steak relative to baking a cake, relative to making some of the manufactured goods, when you take the plastic wrapping, when you take the processing of that food into account. So don't tell me that my steak is killing the planet when you're eating Twinkies out of a bag. It's a distorted reality that is an agenda-driven reality, not a fact-driven reality. And I hope your movie exposes some of that stuff.
I wish one person, you know, I should just do a side-by-side comparison movie on the making of 1 gallon of seed oil versus the same amount in meat and what that causes in CO2 to the, it would be scary to think just to get 1 gallon of seed oil, what it takes to do that. Folks, everything you eat at McDonald's, everything you eat at a fast food restaurant, anything you eat at a chain restaurant, anything you eat at Taco Bell, anywhere like that, all seed oils. You buy a dressing, you buy Thousand Island Ranch, whatever you get, seed oils. You want to talk about something that's killing you and killing the planet? Go after seed oils. Oh no, we call those vegetable oils, and they're healthy for you, according to the vegans.
I live here in Palm Beach County. There's huge sugar groves, sugarcane fields all over the place. You know how they harvest that? They burn it. It's a slash and burn thing.
Yeah.
The amount of, now they're changing that industry a little bit, but to produce sugar requires a huge amount of release of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And then processing it requires the same. So don't blame my steak for what your sugar and your seed oil fats are doing. You're absolutely right. It's, they're trying to poke us in the eye because they've got an agenda. And, you look at TV, there's no ads on TV for meat.
No.
For vegetables. The ads are all for processed crap. How to become fat and then how to lose weight. Those are the dominant ads on TV. And it's a travesty that we are in an economy of health rather than in a clinical situation of better health.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to switch gears a little bit. Let me do a quick ad here. I want to find out how you got into this. What caused you as a doctor? I mean, you could have done anything as a doctor. You're a smart guy. You could do anything, but you went down that road. I want to know why. But first, I have to tell everybody about something that's not ruining the planet. As a matter of fact, it's helping the planet. Not only that, Man, it tastes good. I'm talking about Villa Cappelli olive oil, the longest running sponsor of this show. It's not a seed oil, folks. As a matter of fact, in this country, you can take an olive oil and call it extra virgin olive oil, first press. You know, the tree barely knows the olive is missing. This is the best olive oil in the world because I bought it at a wine store that has a cheese shop in it. This is great. That stuff can have up to 40% seed oil, and our government, our FDA, lets them put 100% pure olive oil on that packaging. Not true with Villa Cappelli. There are no perfumes in there. There's no coloring. What you see is what you get. Paul Cappelli and Stephen Crutchfield started that company way back when. They've been sponsoring this show for 10 years. So long that Paul Cappelli is no longer with us. God rest his soul. Great man. Man, if we could have just gotten him to stop smoking. Go check out Villa Cappelli. If you spend more than $100 after your 10% Vinnie discount, you'll get free shipping. And if you buy a couple of 3-liter 10s, that'll be well over $100. Man, that 6 liters, that would cost like $1 million to ship. You get that free. Promo code Vinnie, VINNIE, gets you 10% off every single time. Villa Cappelli olive oil. Go to villacappelli.com or go to vinnietartaries.com and click through the banner. When you get there, put in the promo code, get your 10% off, and spend over $100 after the discount code and get that free shipping. I see Robert over there just writing that down because he's going to be ordering some as soon as the show is over with. Folks, we're talking to Dr. Robert Cywes. I can't get enough of this guy. Robert, before I even get into how you got into obesity and curing obesity, I'm going to beg you to come back on the show again. Right?
I'd love to do that. I mean, these conversations are so important and they are controversial. Whether you agree or disagree with me, my objective is to make people think, use their brains. If the cholesterol has been removed from the brain by their statins, use your brain and think. And if we've triggered you to think about your own personal situation, your own personal health, your own personal footprint in the world, you and I have done our job. And you're doing that with your movie. I love that. We do it patient at a time here in my office. But to answer that question, if I can go there, Vinnie, I created diabetes. I created diabetes in the laboratory by mistake.
Really?
And in the 1990s, I was in Toronto. I was working on my PhD, and we were working in a liver transplant laboratory. And some livers, when they get transplanted between the donor and the recipient, when they flush them with the recipient's blood, they don't work. And in the 1990s, we believed that the liver really needed sugar. And the theory was that the liver ran out of sugar as an energy source from the donor to the recipient. So my master's thesis was to glycogenate the liver, to shove sugar into that liver so that it would survive better. Now, I was doing my PhD with a guy called David Jenkins on my committee. Who's David Jenkins? He's the father of the glycemic index that we currently use for the mismanagement of diabetes. Be that as it may, we believed in sugar. So I created an experiment where I would infuse sugar into the liver of a rat, of a pig, and of a human. And we became so good at shoving that sugar into the liver. And you know what we found, Vinnie? The more sugar we were able to put in the liver, the worse the livers performed.
Wow.
Why the hell is that true? Because it's supposed to be better. That's exactly the opposite hypothesis. And when we did autopsies or biopsies on those livers, and we looked at them under the microscope, we saw the blood vessels, those tiny little capillaries in the liver called sinusoids, were plugged up with blood clots, fibrin clots, platelet clots, and white cells. So there was this massive inflammatory reaction happening in the liver. And we broke it down, and we proved that sugar at high concentration in the bloodstream was damaging, was activating, was inflaming the blood vessels. And when those blood vessels, the cells of the blood vessels should be like fried eggs. The blood should just rush by very smoothly, should be like Teflon. But when they become activated, just like a little COVID molecule, they have these probes on there that attract the inflammatory response. And we realized that sugar was a primary trigger of that inflammatory response in a dose-dependent way. And when it plugs up those blood vessels, that is diabetes. That is what your elevated blood sugar does in all the small vessels in your body. That's why your brain doesn't work. Type 3 diabetes, dementia, from high blood sugar. That's why your eyes don't work. That's why your heart doesn't work. The blood vessels that become atherosclerotic have these fine capillaries in the blood vessels themselves that have that diabetic process. Your toes drop off, you get erectile dysfunction, your kidneys don't work. Every organ in your body gets damaged by this blood clotting. And I had this aha moment in the lab to say, oh my God, we're completely opposite. It was actually after I left the lab. Because you want to talk about Walter Willett, you want to talk about some of those guys that believe in their own distorted science. I couldn't believe in the laboratory that my data was giving me the opposite result. So what good scientists do under pressure from their grants is they find outliers and they remove the outliers, the convenient outliers from their data so that they tell us the truth we want to hear. And that's what the Chan Public School of Health is very good at doing. They do these huge, big studies. And then when the studies tell them that a low-fat diet isn't any better, it's actually worse than a low-carbohydrate diet, they remove outliers and they distort the reality and they look inside the numbers for something that speaks their truth. But their truth is not the truth. And I did the same thing in the laboratory. And I'm guilty of that. I misrepresented the full data set. But when I went back years later and I looked at that, I proved that sugar was damaging the liver. It was causing fatty liver. It was destroying the liver. It was causing diabetes. And then on top of that, as a pediatric surgeon, I started operating on kids, not bariatric surgery, but taking gallbladders, doing polycystic ovarian surgery, operations on diseases that children shouldn't have. But these kids were 300-400 pounds at 14, 13 years old. These girls had had their periods since the age of 7, and they had this horrible polycystic ovarian syndrome. So we were taking out ovaries, we were taking out gallbladders, but I couldn't help the kids with their obesity. And you know, Vinnie, when I went into their rooms after the surgery, there was one particular, at Vanderbilt University where I was working, this one particular kid, African-American kid, 400 pounds, nicest family, very permissive. Everybody was huge.
Right.
Walking to the room, after his surgery, he's feeling great, his gallbladder's out. What's he eating? He's eating French fries. He's drinking.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
But the point is, I looked, where's the fat? Where's the fat that causes gallstones? Where is the fat in this kid's diet? 90% of what he was eating, the big bags of M&Ms, 90% of what he's eating is sugar. How is it possible that something he's not eating, fat, could have caused his obesity? How is it something he's not eating could have caused his gallstones? And right there, the penny dropped one night. I was lying in bed and I had literally that eureka moment from my PhD, from the work that I did in the laboratory in Toronto, from this big kid, and from myself, who at that time was weighing 300 pounds. This is sugar. This is sugar. This is not fat. This is sugar. And the penny dropped for me. And I realized when I looked at my relationship with sugar, that I was using it as a very powerful drug to manage my emotional needs, as was that big, heavy family. They were using sugar and starch like people use nicotine, like people use alcohol, like people use heroin. And that was the birth of the carbohydrate addiction model. Carbohydrate insulin model of diabetes and obesity, but also from an addiction perspective. Why am I 300 pounds and all I can dream of is an ice cream? Yeah. Because it is my drug. And the fatter we get, the more imprisoned we are in our own fat, and the more that relationship grows. So at 300 pounds, I couldn't go to Disney and ride. I couldn't go for a run. What's left? Crystal meth. And my crystal meth was a little white crystal. And I eventually realized also, and this is so important, I am not capable of moderation. I can't eat two chips out of the bag. I can't eat an apple because once I do, that sugar rush makes me want more. Yes, it's an apple. It's health. No, it's not. It's sugar.
It's sugar. Your brain, once your brain gets it. As a matter of fact, my good friend, he was the one that said, you got to get this guy on the show. Don Coddington, I think, talked to you a couple of weeks ago. And I said to him, Don and I, the guy's in great shape, right? And he's always in great shape, but he was probably 70 pounds heavier than he is now. And he's not that tall. And we climbed Mont Blanc. And even the guys were like, we don't know if this guy's going to make it up. He made it up better than most people because, I would get him into, zone 2 and we would train and we would do the whole thing. but he was addicted. Just as you would say, he was so addicted that no matter how many times he tried to, I'm his buddy, we're good friends. I'm the guy who's been yelling about low carb on the internet, one of the forefathers of bringing it to the internet 12 years ago when I wrote the book. And I was like, Don, how out of everyone in the world, you can't, he was like, you don't understand, man. And at some point, for whatever reason, there was this woman, a friend of his, who's a carnivore, and he decided to just try to go carnivore for a week. And he goes, what do you think about this? I said, dude, whatever gets you off the sugars, just do it. He kept following what she was doing. She's a doctor. I don't know if she wants to be mentioned on the air or not, but she helps people with carnivore situations and everything. He remained a carnivore, and he just kept doing that because it was a way for him to control his addiction to, he told me about products I didn't even know existed. We joke about it now. He would go, yeah, I just walk in a grocery store and buy a box of devil dogs. And I was, what's a devil dog? And he goes, don't act like you don't know what a devil dog is. Like, Don, I have no idea what a devil dog, I've never seen a devil. I thought he was making it up. I knew what a ding dong was. I knew what a ho-ho was because they had funny names and they were around when I was a kid. And, when he said devil dog the first time, I was like, he goes, you're acting hoity-toity, like you don't know what that is. I said, Don, if I'm going to eat something sweet, it's going to be ice cream. And then I don't need ice cream. I could take it or leave it. I would rather eat. It took me a long time to understand that addiction of a guy who was a close friend. And, 70 pounds later, all he figured out, and it's like everyone else. It's like, you can't go to AA and then have a couple of drinks on the weekend. It doesn't work that way. You can't go to NA, Narcotics Anonymous, and have, just a little Coke on the weekends. It doesn't work that way. It's an all or nothing proposition for people like you, doctor, and also my buddy, Don Coddington. But if you do it, it works, correct?
And that's the whole point. As long as you do it, it works really well. Let me ask you this question, Vinnie. You exercise every day.
Sure.
Exercise, yeah. Physical activity is probably your foundation for emotion management. When you're having a rough day, when you're bored, when you're having fun, you're doing something physically active. What would happen if you broke both your arms and both your legs?
Well, actually, I was in a body cast at one point. So I can tell you what happens.
What happened?
I went stir crazy. I was young when I was in that body cast. As a matter of fact, I broke it in football. I broke my femur in so many places. They said it looked like powder, and they put me in a cast up to my nipples. And my bedroom, I grew up in the deep South in Louisiana in the swamp.
Right.
I noticed there was a bunch of squirrels outside every day. So I had the guys bring my 22 into the bedroom, and they would open the window, and I would squirrel hunt, and then they would go pick them up and skin them for me and the whole thing. And I felt like I had to do something. At one point, my dad knew the guy that worked at the funeral home. So he went and got the cot that they rolled dead people around in. He brought it home to the house, and there was some 8mm tape of me doing this. They brought me outside in this cot flat and had me shooting basketballs outside because I had to be out in the sun. I had to be moving. I was a 13-year-old kid at that time. I just turned 13. Same thing happened when I had the Riemann run done to my right shoulder. I had a complete shoulder, that's a very painful. They said, you're going to be on painkillers for 6 months. I was off of all painkillers on the 11th day. I did take some Tylenol on the 11th and 12th day, and then that was it. Because I had to get moving.
What you got to look at is when you lose something that you depend on for emotion management,
right?
Your life, you said you went stir crazy, your life collapses, and then you figure out ways to get back to what you love to do.
Right.
When you hurt yourself, when you're in that body cast, basically it was like your best friend had been killed. And when people go on keto diets, when people are deprived of sugar, when they're addicted to it, it's exactly the same. And the depression, the anxiety. So a large part of the difference between an addiction management program and a diet, on an addiction management program, you can have as much carbohydrate as you want to, but you choose not to.
Right.
You're not deprived of it, but also You want to develop other strategies. You want to get that gun and shoot the squirrels. You want to go and be able to shoot some hoops. You want to find other things to do so that you don't go crazy. And all too often, ketogenic diets deprive people of their drug of choice. They don't understand it. They don't understand that they're addicted to that carbohydrate. But when you kill their best friend through some diet, they do it for a while. They feel great because they're losing a bit of weight. And then as soon as life throws them an emotional curveball, they crash and they burn. And 98% even of ketogenic diets fail over time. You know, you and I think, are similar ages. We're in our late 50s. That means if we're going to live to 100, we've got another 40 years of doing this.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a long time for someone who can't do 2 years. So the addiction methodology allows you to kill your best friend comfortably. And changing why you have that relationship with sugar and starch is far more important than changing what you eat. So I just wanted to bring that context in play because it is, you know, you mentioned the person that I can't talk about because I have a professional relationship with him, your buddy. But he discovered that, but he had to discover that after being an expert at failing weight loss programs, after being an expert at not being able to be successful.
Right.
And the carnivore diet helps him to be successful because it is absolute. And is carnivore radical? Yes. But diabetes and obesity are far more radical in a negative way than eating animal products.
I'll tell you something Don did on a positive note. This summer, we went, you know, I was sponsoring an event out in the desert in California. We had climbed Whitney before, and I had to come down before we got to the top because my nephew wasn't feeling well. So we didn't get to climb that together. We like to high five each other at the top of
Right.
Mont Blanc and everywhere, wherever we go. And so I said, Don, why don't you just fly out, meet me out at Whitney, and we'll go up. So we went up, we summited, came back down, did the event, went back to Whitney again, tried to summit again, but there was a lightning storm. So we decided, you know, valor is the better part. So we just turned around and came down, and he went back to New York. I came back to Virginia. And about a week later, he called me and he goes, I'm back in the desert. I said, oh, what? He goes, I'm back in Lone Pine. So what are you doing? He goes, I'm climbing Whitney again. And he climbed it 2 more times.
Wow, that's cool.
You know, he's found a new addiction. He's found, you know, he's lost all this weight. Plus he's still in great shape because.
But Vinnie, it's not an addiction. You see, an addiction is qualified by harm. If there's no harm to what you're doing, it's a passion. So what he's found, he's trading an addiction for a passion. And the beauty is the passion keeps giving in a positive way. It doesn't take away from you.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's the big difference. And an effort-based emotion management system is about the passion you have and the love you have for what you do without harm. And some people, I'm addicted to this. Addiction is a negative word.
Right. No, look, I say on this podcast all the time, you know, I look at exercise as the same as brushing my teeth and wiping my ass. Neither one of those are necessary, but they're both great ideas. So,
and they always make you feel good without any negative on the back end.
Yeah, unless you get the wrong kind of toilet paper, but that's a whole different story. Robert, I have another podcast to do, but hang on. I want to say goodbye to you off the air. Folks, if you like what's going on here, you know what to do. Before you go shopping on Amazon, please go to VinnieTartaries.com. Click through the banner. It puts coal on the fire, gets my train down the track. I also have the Superfan page over there. Also, the movie is going to be coming out soon. There's nowhere to go to pre-order it right now, but that will be coming up so you can check out the movie when it comes out. And you know what it's called? Beyond Impossible. I'm getting away from the whole fat theme, and I'm going right in. I'm going straight on. I'm going to turn this part of the recording